Welcome back to your quiet refuge, the subconscious classroom, your peaceful haven as night falls. We're honored to share this journey with you once more. Tonight, we drift gently through the mists of time to explore a forgotten world, the history of lost smells. Imagine wandering ancient streets where fragrances now vanished once filled the air. Extinct flowers blooming in sunlit gardens, spice-laden caravans weaving across deserts, kitchens rich with fires and herbs, and sacred altars smoking with resins and incense. You are no longer here in this moment. Instead, you become a silent witness to the fading sense of civilizations past. Whispers of aroma carried on the wind, memories of smells that shaped cultures, rituals, and lives now lost to history. Before we embark on this olfactory voyage, please share which eras or mysteries you'd like to uncover next. If this journey through the invisible sense of history moves you, consider liking and subscribing, so together we may continue to wander these fragrant corridors of time. Breathe deeply, let your senses awaken to the unseen, and let the stories of lost smells unfold around you. Let us begin. Part 1. There was a time when the world smelled different, utterly, inescapably different. It wasn't just the absence of pollution or plastic or synthetic fragrance. It was the presence of something deeper, a tapestry of odors woven from plants that no longer grow, foods no longer cooked, bodies no longer prepared in the same ways. Entire civilizations carried their own olfactory identities, dense with smoke, spice, sweat, incense, rot, and ritual. But time, in its quiet erasure, has stripped them away. What we're left with is silence where scent used to be. This is the history of those lost smells and the lives that once unfolded inside them. To walk through a marketplace in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia was to be saturated. The air was thick with frankincense and myrrh burning in clay bowls. Sheep fat sizzled over fire pits. Baskets of dried fish, fresh barley bread, honey-soaked cakes, and crushed dates created a pungent symphony that clung to the skin. Nearby, scribes wrote on clay tablets. The reed styluses dipped in ink made with crushed minerals and rare oils. Even the tablets had a smell, sun-dried mud and aged resin from the wood of scribal boxes. And every nose knew it. It meant commerce. It meant ritual. It meant home. But none of these scents remain. The species of resins and herbs burned in those temples have since gone extinct or evolved. The cooking methods changed. The open hearths gave way to sealed ovens, and the air, once wild with unfiltered aroma, was tamed. The sacred groves that supplied these oils were cut down, over-harvested, paved, or forgotten. The smell of Mesopotamia is gone. In ancient Egypt, scent was more than luxury, it was divine utility. The pharaohs were entombed with perfumed cones placed on their heads. These cones, made of animal fat and essential oils, melted slowly in the desert heat, releasing wafts of lotus, myrrh, and kifi, a sacred compound of wine, honey, raisins, cinnamon, and unknown resins. Entire lives were scented by this mixture. Births, weddings, offerings, and the long process of embalming. In fact, mummification itself was an aromatic ordeal. Natron, used to dry the body, had its own sharp tang. The body was rubbed with cedar oil, wrapped in linen scented with cinnamon, and finally sealed in a coffin that held the smell of centuries. But kifi no longer exists in its original form. Its recipe, described by priests and travelers, included ingredients either extinct or so transformed by modern agriculture that they can no longer be reproduced. The groves of the blue lotus flower, once abundant along the Nile, no longer bloom with the same strength of fragrance. The resin trees that bled incense now bleed no more. Even the pyramids, once filled with scented offerings, now lie empty, airless stone tombs scrubbed clean by time and wind. Across the Mediterranean, in classical Greece, the scent of the gymnasium was both feared and admired. Men anointed themselves in olive oil infused with herbs, thyme, rosemary, coriander, and scraped their bodies clean with metal strigils. But the scraped oil and sweat, known as gloyos, wasn't thrown away. It was collected, bottled, and sold. Some believed it had medicinal properties. Others rubbed it on their own skin as a form of vicarious strength. The smell of gloyos, of copper and bruised herbs and sweat, has been erased, not just because the practice disappeared, but because the air in which it once lived no longer exists. Urban wind patterns, climate change, and the loss of traditional distillation methods mean that even if one could recreate gloyos, it would not smell the same. Roman baths carried their own potent aura. The caldarium, the hottest room, reeked of heated stone, damp lime mortar, and the musk of hundreds of bodies. Oil lamps mixed with vapor, forming a haze that stung the nose. Lavender and rose oils floated atop the pools, faint and intermittent. And then, always, there was the unmistakable odor of the communal latrines nearby, for even the grandeur of Rome had its limits. The perfumes worn by Roman elites, made from saffron, spikenard, and imported nardinum oils, have left behind recipes. But the plants themselves, cultivated in precise Mediterranean microclimates, have vanished. Wars changed trade routes. Fires consumed forests. And what was once a perfume worn by the powerful now lives only in fragile glass vessels buried beneath ash in places like Herculaneum and Pompeii. In the Islamic Golden Age, scent was knowledge. Alchemists in Baghdad experimented with distillation not for profit, but for insight. They boiled rose petals over copper bowls, condensed vapors, and created the earliest attar's concentrated perfumes. To be educated was to be perfumed. A scholar's house smelled of ink, sandalwood ash, and dried citrus. These were not indulgences, but reflections of divine harmony. Cleanliness and fragrance were acts of devotion. But even here, much has been lost. The oud trees of southern Arabia, once a common source of incense, have been nearly wiped out. Their resin, when burned, produced a smoky sweetness unlike any modern substitute. And the citrus used in Islamic perfumes, thin-skinned, wild, sharp with oil, is no longer grown. In China, during the Tang Dynasty, scent marked refinement. The literati class composed poetry beside incense burners crafted from jade and porcelain. These burners did not merely perfume the air, they measured time. A stick of incense that burned for exactly 1 hour allowed monks to meditate, write, or debate within the bounds of ephemeral fragrance. The formulas used: agarwood, dried plum blossoms, rare fungi, were collected from across the empire, from forests that no longer exist. War, famine, and shifting borders erased the geography of these aromas. What once lingered over scrolls and silks now floats nowhere. In medieval Europe, smells were warnings and wards. Lavender hung over sickbeds. Rosemary boiled in pots was believed to drive away plague. The streets stank of chamber pots, of tanneries, of wet wool and horse sweat. But inside apothecaries, a different air stirred. Jars of crushed herbs and exotic resins lined the shelves. Musk, ambergris, and civet, sourced through brutal extraction from animals, were prized not for pleasantness, but power. Ambergris, a waxy secretion from sperm whales, was found floating on beaches and burned like incense. It had no stable smell, sometimes sweet, sometimes foul, and its unpredictability made it alluring. But modern whaling restrictions and ocean pollution have rendered ambergris a ghost scent, barely legal, rarely real. In the kitchens of those centuries, scents also ruled. Open hearths produced aromas that modern stoves could never replicate. Wood smoke soaked in with meat, fish salted and smoked over bay leaves, bread baked beside ash. Spices like long pepper and grains of paradise, once common, have vanished from cuisine and vocabulary alike. And with them, those smells, fiery, wild, fermented, burnt, have gone too. The Silk Road was more than a trade route, it was an artery of scent. Caravans moved not just silk and gold, but saffron, cinnamon, clove, and cardamom. Camels were loaded with sacks of dry ginger and galangal. Along the way, fires were lit with pine cones. Tents were perfumed with rose water or animal fat mixed with crushed herbs. To stand in a market in Samarkand was to smell two continents at once. The sharp tang of fermented mare's milk from the steppes mingled with the sugary smoke of Turkish delight, the citrusy oil of Persian limes, and the deep, resinous musk of imported woods. Yet many of those trade routes are gone. Border shifts, colonial disruptions, and ecological collapse have made their convergence impossible. And the spices themselves, altered by modern farming or rendered obsolete by refrigeration, do not smell the same. Even the camels, once central to this olfactory orchestra, are now trucked in or replaced by synthetic materials. What we've lost, we didn't just forget, we evolved away from. Part 2. The dawn of early modern Europe brought with it a flood of scent, bold, refined, weaponized. As the Renaissance took hold in Florence and Venice, perfume became not just an accessory, but an assertion of intellect and status. Scent was now philosophy made flesh, art bottled in crystal. Yet, what these early perfumers worked with was vastly different from the shelf-ready fragrances of today. They distilled tinctures of iris root, storax resin, bitter orange blossom, and animal musk into heavy oils worn in sachets under gowns or rubbed into hair. These weren't delicate floral spritzes. They were powerful, lingering compositions built to outlast the odor of sewage-stained streets and human proximity. The scent of Florence in 1490 was not of flowers but of contrast. The animalistic undercurrent of unwashed bodies against the luxurious sharpness of myrtle and mint, rosemary and rose. It was a perfume of class struggle. The noblewoman's wardrobe reeked of civet and violet oil, while the laundress carried on her hands the sting of lye soap and boiled linen. Perfumers mixed in secrecy, like alchemists, writing their recipes in code. But many ingredients they relied upon are now impossible to find. Civet, a glandular secretion from the African civet cat, was once prized for its deep, musky tone, but the creatures were kept in cruel captivity, and modern laws and sensibilities have all but removed civet from the perfumer's palette. Ambergris, while still used in rare high-end products, is a shadow of its former self. And the storax trees once tapped for their medicinal and aromatic sap have vanished from entire regions, pushed out by agriculture or simply exhausted. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, Tudor London carried a different olfactory profile. Rotting fish, damp wood, coal smoke, and tallow candles made up the urban baseline. Churches offered brief respite. Beeswax and frankincense, sweet hay from rush-covered floors. In the homes of the gentry, pomanders, hollow metal spheres filled with clove-studded oranges and crushed herbs, hung around necks or dangled from belts, acting as both deodorant and talisman against plague. But again, the air has changed. The original wax formulas, infused with meadow herbs, no longer exist in mass production. The plants once used, costmary, Rue Angelica, were phased out, deemed obsolete, too pungent, or too rural. The dried rushes scattered across floors were replaced by carpets, sealing off yet another layer of history's aromatic archive. The colonization of the Americas and expansion into Africa and Asia created new global scent economies. Tobacco leaves, cacao beans, and vanilla pods arrived in European ports with a smell so foreign it caused discomfort and obsession in equal measure. In early Spanish settlements, the scent of cured tobacco, sweet, smoky, intoxicating, hovered over humid plazas and echoed inside stone chapels. Vanilla, harvested from orchids in Central America, was originally used not as a dessert flavoring but as a scent worn close to the skin. The orchids themselves needed a very specific pollinator, the Melipona bee, native only to that region, to thrive naturally. The moment vanilla was commercialized, it began to lose its original scent. Today's vanilla is often synthetic or genetically engineered, missing the complexity of the wild pods once revered by Aztec nobles. And chocolate, when first brewed by the Maya and later the Spanish, had none of the milky sweetness we associate with it. The original brew was bitter, spiced with chili and maize, and its aroma was earthy, sharp, and slightly fermented. That scent no longer exists, outside perhaps of a few archaeological recreations. The modern chocolate bar is a distant descendant, sterilized for mass enjoyment. As empire expanded, so did exploitation. In the Dutch East Indies, clove and nutmeg plantations turned islands into perfume prisons. The trees were burned, transplanted, hybridized, and eventually industrialized. The result? A global shift in how spice was experienced, not hand-ground in kitchens or temple ceremonies, but sealed in factory bags, their oils faded by shipping containers and storage units. The Industrial Revolution did more to kill the ancient world of smell than any war. Coal dust, chemical runoff, and mass production dulled the air. Cities became clouds of smog, cloaking whatever faint perfume might have remained in the flowers, foods, or fabrics of everyday life. In Victorian England, factories overpowered neighborhoods. The smell of fresh bread gave way to metal. The wet ink of newspapers replaced the resin of hand-copied books. Even church incense was diminished, its clouds scattered by mechanical ventilation and gas lighting. Occupationally, entire scent-based trades disappeared. The coopers who crafted oak barrels infused with the scent of aging wine or vinegar were replaced by metal canning operations. The brewers who boiled hops in small batches lost ground to industrial breweries with closed systems. The cobblers who softened leather with pine resin and tallow saw their craft overtaken by machine-stitched shoes sealed in rubber and glue. And with those professions went their smells. The sharp, sweet air of a cooper's shed, the yeast-rich musk of a city baker's basement, the crushed bark and oil of a rope-maker's workshop, all replaced by the neutral sterility of packaging and plastic. In the countryside, farms changed too. Before the gasoline engine, fields were plowed by beasts, whose sweat and manure mixed with freshly turned soil and blooming hay. Harvest season brought the scent of scythe-cut barley, of fermented apples, of open-air cheese curing in barns. All of this has been erased. Today's mechanized farms are quieter, more efficient, and often scentless. Some smells were lost not to time but to policy. The banning of burning coal indoors in cities removed the foggy, acrid tang that once defined places like London and New York. Cleaner air meant better lungs, but also the vanishing of a certain kind of identity, an aroma layered into wood panels, hearths, and hair. Likewise, The removal of open-air markets and livestock from urban centers stripped away the brutal yet honest smells of blood, hay, and dung. The regulated cleanliness of supermarkets replaced the funk of goat cheese and the buzz of fresh fish stalls with refrigerated sterility. Public laundries, once steamy sanctuaries of soap and gossip, were phased out. Instead of wooden tubs filled with lye and lavender water, we now have humming machines sealed behind doors. The smell of boiling fabric in sunlit courtyards, of scrubbed linen laid out on hedgerows to dry, is another ghost. Perfume itself was transformed. Once a volatile marriage of oil, alcohol, and raw botanicals, it was now synthesized. What had once required distilling hundreds of jasmine petals or shaving the rind of rare citrus was replicated in labs using molecules and memory. The result? Consistency, but also loss. Modern perfumes are shadows of their ancestors. They may mimic rose or leather or smoke, but the soul, the unpredictable flicker that came from living material, is gone. And worse still, our noses have changed with it. Because scent is not just physical, it is cultural, cognitive, personal. The nose is trained by time and place. The Romans could detect hints of spikenard. The Tang dynasty poets distinguished between multiple species of plum blossom. The Renaissance elite debated the superiority of bergamot over neroli. We no longer speak that language. Our vocabularies have narrowed. Our expectations are shaped by department stores and detergent commercials. The sharp citrus bite of crushed verbena leaves, the musty heat of straw mats in midsummer, the complexity of human sweat after hard labor. These have been replaced by fresh linen and clean rain and other synthetic abstractions. And so we not only lost the smells, we lost the ability to miss them. There were moments, though, when scent defied extinction. During World War I, soldiers wrote letters home not about what they saw, but what they smelled. The rotting corpses, the damp canvas of tents, the lingering aroma of coffee before battle. And in the Second World War, Jewish prisoners in concentration camps described the phantom scent of Sabbath bread, of honeysuckle on their mother's scarves, of soap that once reminded them of safety. Even in horror, scent clings. It lingers when language breaks down. It stores memory in the body. It's often the last thing we forget and the first thing that disappears. Part 3. Some of the world's most ancient smells were never meant to please the senses. They were designed to invite the divine. In sacred spaces from Delhi to Delphi, from Petra to the Andes, scent functioned not as decoration, but as language. Fragrance became ritual, a kind of smoke-borne communication between the human and the eternal. And though the gods may have received these offerings, it is humanity who has forgotten them. In the temples of ancient India, long before sandalwood became bottled commodity, it was a sacred presence, burned in offerings, rubbed on statues, blended with turmeric and rosewater to mark thresholds between the mundane and the holy. To enter the inner sanctum of a temple in Tamil Nadu or Varanasi was to step into centuries of compacted, perfumed ash. Every idol smelled alive, wood warmed by sun, layered with ghee, camphor, and marigold. That scent could linger in the skin and hair for days. It was memory incarnate. Yet many of those oils were drawn from trees that have since been over-harvested or driven to the edge of extinction. The original Mysore sandalwood forests are nearly gone, their trees harvested into silence. The camphor used then, natural, crystalline, cooling, has been replaced in many parts of the world with synthetic substitutes. And while modern incense may imitate the shape of the sacred, its soul is missing. Farther east, in the mountain temples of Japan, Monks composed listening sessions, not with music, but with incense. Kodo, the way of incense, was a highly formalized ceremony where participants listened to the scent of different woods, trying to identify their subtle differences, stories, and sources. Kiara, the most prized of these, came from agarwood trees infected with a specific mold, which gave the wood its complex, sweetly pungent fragrance. But Kiara is nearly gone. Over-harvested, under-regrown, its remaining reserves are so rare that single chips of it are stored like gold. Today, most Kodo ceremonies use synthetics or generic blends, quiet echoes of an experience once deeply alive. In the highlands of Mesoamerica, the sacred tree was copal. When burned, it released a thick, citrusy smoke used to communicate with the gods of rain, maize, and death. The Maya and Aztecs offered it during festivals, funerals, and solar eclipses. The air would turn milky and bright, filled with the hum of chants and the bittersweet scent of burning resin. Modern copal resin still exists, but not in the same way. The trees have changed, the climate has changed, and the people who burned them once in massive public ritual are no longer there to direct the flame. In Ethiopia and Eritrea, frankincense was, and still is, used in Orthodox Christian liturgy, swirling through stone churches built into mountainsides, rising through vaults and toward painted ceilings. But the boswellia trees from which it comes are declining, over-harvested and stressed by erosion and goats. Once, frankincense was so valuable it was traded ounce for ounce with gold. Today, it is often adulterated, mixed with lesser resins to stretch supply. Even in places where ritual remains, the smells are changing. In medieval Europe, the burning of incense wasn't just sacred, it was political. Catholic cathedrals swung censers filled with a blend of frankincense, benzoin, and styrax. The scent proclaimed authority, purity, and mystery. But during the Protestant Reformation, many of these smells were cast out as symbols of idolatry. Churches were scrubbed clean. The smoky sweetness of worship was replaced with bare wood and silent air. That loss wasn't just theological, it was olfactory. Generations grew up without those layers of scent memory, without the sacred fog that once marked transitions between body and soul. What remained was absence. Elsewhere, indigenous cultures preserved complex olfactory rituals that colonization nearly wiped out. In North America, tribes such as the Lakota, Anishinaabe, and Dine used sage, sweetgrass, and cedar in purification and prayer. A single braid of sweetgrass, when lit, released a scent both sweet and earthy, like vanilla soaked in river soil. Cedar, when burned, smelled like fire in a pine forest just after rain. But as land was taken and ceremonies were banned, these scents vanished from public life. For many years, burning sage in the open could result in arrest. And today, what's sold as white sage in boutiques often comes from over-harvested lands, stripped of meaning and context, traded like trinkets. Even in urban spiritual traditions, scents have faded. The Jewish Havdalah ceremony once relied on a special spice box, besamim, filled with cloves, cinnamon bark, and dried orange peel. It marked the end of the Sabbath, allowing those present to carry the sweetness of rest into the new week. Today, the ritual remains, but the complexity of the scent has narrowed. Prepackaged spice blends replace what used to be seasonal, local, deeply intentional. Muslim traditions, too, have experienced this shift. In many parts of the Islamic world, oud agarwood was burned in the home, at weddings, in mosques, a scent of family, memory, and faith. But commercial oud is often synthetic now, or so diluted that its original mystique is lost. And the subtle variations between Indian, Cambodian, and Indonesian ouds once prized and understood, have become flattened into a single, generic scent. Why does this matter? Because scent doesn't just flavor memory, it anchors identity. Entire belief systems, cosmologies, and daily rhythms were once built around what was smelled and when. You knew it was harvest season when the air changed. You knew a child had been born because the house was filled with herbs. You knew morning by the scent of incense, bread, or cloth. In ancient Rome, funerals were marked with a barrage of scent: burning juniper, crushed myrtle, and the tang of garlands. In Viking funerals, smoke carried bodies toward the heavens, thick with pine and sea salt. In the Indian subcontinent, sandalwood funeral pyres turned sorrow into scent, smoke winding skyward with quiet, terrible grace. Even silence smelled different in the past. A monastery in the hills of 14th century France had no perfumes, no incense. But the stone corridors held the aroma of beeswax polish, of old wool cloaks, of dried apples and stored onions. These were not celebrated smells, but they were real, continuous, anchoring the soul to the season. The sacred and the mundane once smelled different, but both were deeply present. In pre-colonial Africa, the Himba people of Namibia did not bathe with water, but with smoke. They created aromatic fires from special wood and resins, then leaned over the smoke, allowing it to cleanse their bodies and infuse their skin with scent. Women wore a jais paste, a mixture of butterfat and ochre scented with herbs. It protected the skin from sun and insects, but also created a signature aroma, unique to the tribe, to the region, to the person. That smell could tell you who someone was before you saw them. But as traditions vanish under modern pressure, so do these practices and the personal geographies of scent they carry. Even the act of writing once carried scent. In medieval scriptoria, ink was made from oak gall, iron salts, and wine or vinegar. Quills were sharpened over beeswax candles. The smell of vellum, a kind of treated calfskin, mixed with dust and sweat and candle soot. A library in the 15th century didn't smell like paper. It smelled like earth, labor, and ink brewed over fire. That smell is now gone, replaced by the sterile scent of laser printers and factory-bound glue. Even our books have lost their soul. We've tried to bring them back, of course. Museums have begun to replicate historical smells, bottling simulations of old libraries, battlefield camps, and medieval kitchens. But they are echoes, approximations, memories rendered secondhand. Because true scent is not reproducible in isolation. It requires context. It needs the breeze off the Nile, the heat of a Roman bath, the silence of a Kyoto temple. It needs the sound of grinding spice by hand, the slow rendering of animal fat, the repetition of ritual. We don't just miss the smell, we miss the life around it. And so, we walk in cities filled with fragrance advertisements but devoid of real, grounded scent. We clean with lemon-scented chemicals but forget what a real lemon tree in bloom smells like. We wear perfumes that claim oud or rose, but have never once crushed a real petal between our fingers. It is, in many ways, a scentless age. And in losing those smells, we lose something else, an intimacy with the world, a slowness, a richness of memory that no image or sound can replace. Part 4. In the great trade ports of the early modern world, scent was economy. It rolled off ships before cargo even touched the dock. Before the world knew its borders, it knew its smells, drifting from holds packed with cloves and cardamom, silk steeped in camphor, sugar cane syrup still thick with fermentation. To walk through the port of Lisbon in the 16th century was to inhale the earth's breath, strained through wood, sweat, and salt. Spanish galleons docked with barrels soaked in molasses and pitch. Sailors disembarked reeking of rum and tar, of wool left wet for weeks, of rope dust and lye. Traders unpacked bundles from Goa and Sumatra, their woven baskets infused with scents that survived the crossing. Nutmeg that smelled like blood and pine, cinnamon that bit the nose, ginger pungent and warm as breath. But none of this remains. Today's ships are steel. Their containers are sealed. Their scent is plastic, rust, and diesel. The spices still arrive, yes, but machine-dried, vacuum-packed, bleached by time and processing. The baskets are gone. The mingling is gone. The story is gone. In Venice, where East met West, scent defined the city. Perfume shops near the Rialto Bridge once sold oils so potent they had to be diluted before use. Apothecaries stirred syrups and tinctures that perfumed entire canals when discarded. Tanners, too, created leather goods soaked in orris root and rosewater. Even their waste scraps of skin and dye created a miasma unique to the city. Fish, flour, urine, and musk. It was rank, yes, but it was real. Food played its role, too. In the kitchens of Istanbul, the smell of braised lamb and saffron rice would curl into the streets. Vendors carried trays of simit sesame bread rings fresh from wood-fired ovens. Coffee, slow roasted over coals, joined the scent of cardamom and clove, while attar of rose lingered from a freshly shaved guest exiting a nearby hammam. But time and tourism reshaped even Istanbul's breath. The fires were replaced with gas. The attars were swapped for branded cologne. The bread, mass-produced. The coffee, electric. And though the recipes may persist, the ritual and its scent has dulled. Smell has always been food's secret archive. In kitchens before refrigeration, preservation wasn't just a necessity, it was an art. Cheese aged in caves, fish buried in salt or pickled in barrels, herbs dried over open beams, meat smoked not just for taste, but for the incense it gave the household. Even rot had its place, like the fermented fish sauces of Rome, known as garum, or the pungent soy ferments of Imperial China. These scents were strong, alive, and deeply tied to identity. You could tell a region by its pots. You could smell a dialect. But today, stainless steel and airtight packaging mask what once defined entire cultures. Fermentation has become odorless. Cheese is pre-wrapped. Smoking is mechanical. The fire is out. The scent has left. Baking too has changed. In 19th century Paris, bakers lived beneath their shops. They would begin at 2 a.m., and the scent of leavened dough, yeast, and burning flour would rise with the sun. The entire quartier knew the baker by smell. But now, commercial yeast has replaced slow fermentation. Premixed flours arrive in bags, and the 4 a.m. streets are silent, the air still. Even chocolate, perhaps the world's most iconic luxury, has lost its original smell. In West Africa, where most cocoa is now grown, the pods are fermented in banana leaves before export. That scent, wild, floral, slightly sour, is gone by the time the beans reach Europe or the Americas. The chocolate we know smells more of sugar and vanilla than of its true source. The richness has been refined out. And then there's the scent of labor. A blacksmith's forge once smelled of iron, coal, sweat, and leather. Sparks rose with a hiss that carried heat into the nose. The tools' worn wooden handles soaked in oil developed their own subtle perfume over years of work. Today, blacksmithing is rare, often a hobby. The smell of a working forge is one fewer people alive have ever known. The same is true for weavers. Before synthetics, looms were strung with wool or flax, soaked in urine or lye to soften the fibers. The weaving sheds smelled of lanolin, smoke, wet fiber, and bodies in motion. They were loud, living places and deeply human. Now, fabric is produced silently without odor in mechanical solitude. Tanners, too, were once scent craftsmen. The process was brutal, soaking hides in lime and dog dung, then softening them with brains or tallow. The stench was overwhelming, but so were the results. A leather pouch cured this way had a smell that lasted decades. Earthy, animal, alive. But the tanneries are mostly gone. Modern leather is chrome-tanned, chemical-sealed. The scent is barely skin-deep. Even the act of cleaning has lost its smell. Soap once varied by region, and its scent told a story. Aleppo soap, made from laurel oil, smelled green and sharp. Castile soap from Spain, made from olive oil, was soft and creamy. Marseille soap, traditional and salty, left behind a clean that lingered for hours. But commercial soap now smells of branding, not of place. The real ingredients, ashes, oils, thyme, have been replaced by foaming agents and synthetic fragrance. Old cleaning rituals are fading, too. Floor scrubbing with vinegar and pine resin. Linen boiling with bay leaves. Scented wood ash for brushing teeth. These practices have been sterilized away, replaced with plastic bottles that say, "Spring breeze," but smell like nothing known to the earth. The industrial world has made scent optional. Air is filtered, purified, deodorized. Cars are sealed shut. Offices are scent-free zones. Even people are expected to smell like absence, deodorant, body sprays, dry shampoos designed not to carry smell but to erase it. This is not evolution. It is subtraction. A shoemaker in 1700 would know his shop by scent alone. Glue made from fish bladders, leather cut into curls, beeswax heated and brushed onto soles. A printer in 1800 would wake to ink, lead type, and the musk of paper not yet dried. A winemaker in 1900 would read the air before tasting the grapes. These aromas are not nostalgia. They are reality lost. And in losing the smells of these professions, we've lost their memory. Not in books or records, but in the body. Because scent isn't just remembered, it is relived. One whiff can bring back a year, a life, a home. In some places, the battle continues. In Oaxaca, smoke rises from open-air comals where women still grind corn with lime and water to make masa. The smell of roasting chiles and corn, mingled with ash and stone, is a relic and a resistance. In Kyoto, tatami mats are still made from real rushes, their smell of green rice fields trapped in woven straw. In Morocco, cedar chests are passed from mother to daughter, still infused with decades of dried rose and saffron. But these are exceptions. Most traditional perfumery schools now teach with synthetics. Most bakeries use mixes. Most incense is made not from tree resin but pressed sawdust soaked in fragrance oil. We're not just running out of smells, we're running out of people who remember them. Because scent fades fastest when it's no longer shared. A grandmother's stew, a leather journal, a church at midnight. These things linger only as long as someone else can recognize them. We are the last generation to know what a Vichys tape smells like, what chalkboards leave behind, what pencils smell like freshly sharpened in a school where windows opened. That timeline is shrinking, but there is power in remembrance, in recreating what was lost, not through replication but reverence, in slowing down, in cutting fruit by hand, in lighting real incense, not plugging in a warmer, in walking past a bakery and letting the smell catch you by surprise. We don't have to lose it all. Yet, Part 5. The story of scent is also a story of power, woven through the threads of empires, dynasties, and courts where aroma was a tool as potent as any crown or sword. From the palaces of the Medicis in Florence to the salons of Versailles, perfume was both luxury and weapon, an invisible cloak of influence. Florence in the 15th century was a city draped in both political intrigue and olfactory splendor. The Medici family's patronage extended to the arts and to perfumery. Medici weddings were scented affairs, where jasmine and bergamot lined streets and filled ballrooms. The elite commissioned bespoke perfumes, often guarded as jealously as their artworks. But behind the scenes, this beauty had a darker side. Some oils were laced with poisons. Others were used to mask the foul stench of decay, both literal and political. The courtier's scent was a mask worn against disease, against assassination plots, and against the brutal realities of Renaissance life. Across the Channel, in Elizabethan England, perfume played a role in courtship and status. Elizabeth I famously wore her signature scent of ambergris and rose, projecting an image of eternal youth and power. Yet the very ambergris she prized was harvested from whales, creatures whose populations were being decimated by expanding whaling fleets. The perfume industry was complicit in ecological destruction even as it created beauty. Warfare introduced an entirely new layer to the world of scent. Soldiers in the Napoleonic Wars carried little more than muskets and musk oils, animal-based scents believed to ward off infection and promote courage. Battlefield smells were overwhelming. Gunpowder and blood mingled with earth, sweat, and the sickly sweet odor of rot. The smell of death was constant, unavoidable. Soldiers wrote home about it in letters, describing how the stench clung to clothes and hair long after the fighting stopped. It haunted camps, towns, and hospitals. Those odors, so raw and persistent, are lost to modern sanitized memories of war. Yet even in the horrors of combat, scent carried solace. In the trenches of World War I, letters speak of tobacco smoke curling into the cold morning air, the faint smell of coffee brewing over makeshift stoves, the medicinal scent of camphor liniment applied to aching muscles. These were reminders of home, life beyond the mud and wire. Wartime also accelerated the shift to synthetic fragrances. Natural ingredients like vetiver and sandalwood were scarce or diverted to military use. Chemical factories, repurposed for war production, began experimenting with new aromatic molecules that would become staples of modern perfumery. The psychological power of scent became clearer in these times. Aromas could trigger memories, some soothing, some traumatic. Veterans returned with sensory flashbacks, smells entwined with pain and loss. Psychologists began to study these associations, recognizing scent as a key to unlocking the subconscious. The 20th century brought radical changes in how scent was produced, consumed, and understood. Mass production and advertising transformed perfume from aristocratic privilege into a consumer industry. Hollywood glamorized certain scents, linking them with youth, romance, and modernity. But this commercialization also fragmented scent's cultural roots. Fragrances were distilled to broad categories: floral, woody, fresh, oriental. The intricate local complexities of past centuries flattened into marketing tropes. The Second World War introduced further challenges. Cities bombed and burned lost their olfactory landscapes. Communities displaced or destroyed lost their scent-based identities. In concentration camps, survivors later recalled the cruel irony of smelling freshly baked bread from nearby ovens, bread they could never taste. After the war, rapid urbanization and industrial growth sealed cities in concrete and pollution. Fresh air became a luxury. Parks and gardens shrank, along with the flowers and herbs that once perfumed neighborhoods. Yet, the post-war decades also saw the birth of niche perfume houses seeking to reclaim the artistry of scent. Independent perfumers experimented with raw materials, trying to revive forgotten notes and formulas. But the challenge was enormous. Many ingredients were extinct, regulated, or impossible to harvest sustainably. The rise of synthetic aroma chemicals further complicated the landscape. While synthetics allowed for greater consistency and innovation, they also contributed to a sensory flattening. The smell of rose in a bottle could now be a single molecule rather than hundreds of blended petals. The complexity and unpredictability of natural scent were replaced by reliability. Consumers became distanced from the origins of what they wore. Few knew that the musk on their skin was often lab-grown and animal-free, or that jasmine might never have touched a flower. The intimate connection between nature, culture, and body weakened. This disconnection extends beyond perfume. The food industry, too, altered its aromatic identity. Artificial flavors became commonplace. Processed foods lost the subtle sense of fresh herbs, ripe fruit, or roasting meat. The smell of a home-cooked meal faded from many kitchens, replaced by packaged and frozen alternatives. In public spaces, scent was regulated or eliminated altogether. Hospitals, offices, and schools adopted neutral odors to promote hygiene and focus. The scentless became the norm. But even as scent disappeared from daily life, memory held on. Studies in neuroscience reveal that olfactory memory is the most enduring and emotional of all senses. A single scent can evoke vivid images, feelings, and even physiological responses decades after the first encounter. That power is a link to the past, a bridge between history and the present. Some artists and historians now explore scent as a medium for storytelling and cultural preservation. Exhibits recreate the smells of old cities. Perfume museums demonstrate ancient recipes. Experimental archaeologists attempt to distill lost aromas from preserved botanical samples. Yet for most, the history of smell remains invisible. We walk through a world increasingly sanitized and scentless, unaware of what has been lost. The forests of fragrance, the rituals of scent, the labor of noses and hands that created olfactory landscapes. And in that loss lies a warning. Because scent is more than fragrance. It is memory, identity, and belonging. It is a whisper of cultures gone, a touchstone to human experience across time. To lose it is to lose a part of ourselves. Part 6. The 21st century unfolds in a world paradoxically saturated and starved of scent. Everywhere, artificial fragrances saturate public and private spaces, shopping malls, public transit, offices. But these smells are synthetic, manufactured, carefully engineered to trigger emotional responses or mask unpleasant realities. The very air is filtered, deodorized, and sanitized, crafted into a sterile bubble that pushes away the raw, complex sense of nature, labor, and human community. It is a paradox that defines the modern olfactory experience, overwhelmed by artificial smell, yet distanced from authentic scent. This stark duality is the story of scent's final fade and its quiet persistence. The perfume industry, once reliant on rare flowers, precious woods, and animal secretions, is now dominated by synthetic chemistry. The massive advances in organic chemistry during the 20th century unlocked molecules that could replicate or invent aromas never before experienced. Synthetic musk, aldehydes, and floral compounds opened vast new olfactory territories, enabling perfumers to create fragrances that never depended on nature's unpredictability. This transformation had huge advantages. Synthetic fragrances are consistent, affordable, and stable. They allow mass production and a worldwide market. A rose scent can now be distilled into a single molecule that smells the same in New York as in Nairobi. But there is a cost. Synthetic aromas lack nature's infinite complexity. The subtle fluctuations as scent mingles with skin chemistry, the faint imperfections that give each fragrance its unique signature, these vanish. Synthetic scent often feels sharper, cleaner, more uniform, trading depth for reliability. Natural ingredients, once the core of perfume and flavor, have become rare and fiercely protected. Trees like sandalwood, animal-sourced musk, ambergris, and civet are now banned or tightly regulated due to ecological, ethical, and conservation concerns. The demand for sustainability has accelerated reliance on nature-identical compounds, synthetic molecules chemically identical to natural ones, but produced without the source organism. This shift reshapes not only perfume but culture itself. Fragrance is memory, identity, tradition. When the sources disappear, so do stories. The digital age has changed how we relate to scent. The internet brings endless streams of images, sounds, and text into our lives. Yet scents remain stubbornly physical, intangible, and elusive to digital capture. Scientists and technologists work on digital olfaction, devices that can send or recreate scent signals over networks, add aroma to virtual reality, or enhance entertainment with smell. But these remain experimental and distant from everyday use. Instead, modern life has trended toward scentless existence. Hygiene campaigns and health concerns have fostered a culture of deodorization. Public spaces increasingly enforce scent-free policies to accommodate allergies and sensitivities. Many people use products designed not to add fragrance but to mask or erase natural body odors. The natural human scent is often treated as something to hide rather than embrace. Yet despite this sanitization, scent's hold on the human brain remains astonishingly strong. Neuroscience confirms that olfactory cues evoke memories and emotions more vividly than any other sense. A whiff of a childhood perfume or the earthy smell of wet grass can trigger images, feelings, and even physiological reactions that no photograph or song can match. Smell bypasses the rational mind and strikes directly at the emotional core. This is why scent remains an invisible thread linking us to our shared humanity. In homes around the world, centuries-old scent rituals persist. The smell of fresh bread baking offers nourishment and comfort. The waft of incense in a temple carries generations of devotion. The petrichor, the smell of rain on dry earth, evokes renewal and hope. These scents endure as touchstones in an otherwise fast-paced, digital, and sanitized world. Artists and historians increasingly turn to scent as a medium of expression and cultural preservation. Museums recreate the smells of ancient cities, weaving olfactory experiences into exhibitions to deepen immersion. Perfumers research and revive lost recipes, blending botany, chemistry, and history. Experimental archaeologists distill essential oils from preserved seeds and plants, attempting to capture aromas that vanished centuries ago. These efforts reveal a hunger, a yearning to reconnect with a world once rich in aroma. In kitchens worldwide, home cooks embrace heirloom herbs and traditional methods, reclaiming the flavors and smells that industrial food production has all but erased. Small-scale farmers cultivate ancient varieties of flowers and plants, restoring biodiversity and the natural fragrances that come with it. Urban planners plant native flora to revive pollinator habitats and the scents they support. Meanwhile, the commercial fragrance world continues to expand synthetic uniformity, yet simultaneously, niche markets thrive. Consumers seek out natural, organic, and artisanal perfumes, valuing complexity, storytelling, and heritage. These fragrances celebrate imperfections and unpredictability, echoes of a lost era when scent was tied to place and process. Scent is more than an accessory. It is a language, silent, nuanced, and potent. It shapes moods and memories, defines social rituals, and marks identity. In a world increasingly defined by digital connection and virtual realities, scent remains one of the last frontiers of human experience, rooted in the body and environment. Perhaps in this tension between loss and persistence lies hope. Hope that scent, despite its decline, will continue to connect us to our past, to each other, and to the natural world. That the smoky resin burnt on ancient altars, the spice-laden caravans crossing deserts, the fragrant kitchens of lost civilizations, and the personal perfumes carried like secrets in pockets and sleeves are not entirely gone. They survive in memory, in art, in science, and perhaps one day again in the air we breathe. Because smell is more than chemistry. It is history, culture, and life itself. Part 7. In the quiet spaces between history and memory, scent holds a secret power unlike any other. It is intangible, elusive, yet profoundly intimate, a bridge between the external world and the deepest chambers of human experience. The loss of so many smells throughout history is more than a fading of fragrance. It is the erosion of culture, identity, and shared humanity. Imagine a cityscape without the scent of freshly turned earth after spring rain, without the aroma of freshly baked bread drifting from corner bakeries, or the mingling smells of spices, smoke, and leather that once defined bustling market streets. This absence leaves a void that cannot be filled by sight or sound alone. The story of lost smells is the story of what humanity has traded for modern convenience, industrial efficiency, and sanitized spaces. Across centuries, people lived immersed in scents that told stories of origin, of labor, of celebration, and mourning. Perfumes crafted from the petals of now extinct flowers, incense burned in sacred rituals, spices carried along perilous trade routes that connected continents. Every aroma carried meaning beyond its chemical makeup, conveying social status, health, spirituality, or simply the warmth of home. The cultural impact of losing these scents is profound. When a smell disappears, so too does its associated memory and tradition. Rituals that depended on particular aromas vanish or become hollow shadows, the nuanced languages of scent, used to express identity, affection, and place, are silenced. This loss is often invisible but deeply felt. Many find themselves unable to recall the smell of a favorite childhood place, a grandparent's home, or a traditional dish prepared by a loved one. The modern world, with its rapid pace and mass-produced products, often lacks the sensory richness of the past. Instead of layered, evolving smells, we encounter flat, artificial aromas designed for quick appeal and broad commercial reach. Yet scent remains a reservoir of personal and collective memory. Scientists have shown that the olfactory system is closely linked to the brain's limbic system, the seat of emotion and memory. This explains why a single whiff of pine needles, sea air, or a specific spice can instantly transport someone back decades, unlocking feelings and images as vivid as any photograph. These personal memories are also cultural treasures. They connect generations and preserve histories that written words cannot fully capture. The scent of a particular flower, spice, or cooking fire is a living archive of place and time. Efforts to reclaim and preserve this heritage are growing. Museums dedicated to olfactory history open their doors, offering visitors not just sights and sounds, but experiences that engage the nose. Scholars and perfumers collaborate to reconstruct ancient aromas, blending botanical research with historical texts to bring lost scents back to life, if only fleetingly. In the arts, scent is re-emerging as a powerful medium. Installations use aroma to evoke forgotten histories or imagine futures. Writers, too, return to scent as a symbol and a narrative device, weaving it into stories that explore identity, loss, and connection. The digital age presents both challenges and opportunities. While technology often sanitizes and flattens scent, new tools promise to record, replicate, and share aromas in ways once unimaginable. Digital olfaction research aims to transmit smells across the internet, potentially restoring scent's place in human communication. Yet this future depends on awareness and desire. To reclaim lost smells is to embrace complexity and imperfection, to cherish slow processes and natural variation. It is to resist the sterile, sanitized narratives of progress that exclude the full sensory spectrum of human experience. In daily life, small acts of resistance persist. Gardeners cultivate heirloom plants known for their fragrance. Artisanal cooks revive traditional recipes rich in aromatic herbs and spices. Perfume artisans prioritize natural ingredients and historical methods, even amid challenges. Communities maintain scent rituals, from incense offerings to seasonal festivals celebrating harvests and blossoms. These traditions affirm the human need to embed meaning in smell, to mark time and identity through aroma. On a personal level, individuals seek out memories through scent, holding old textiles, preserving family recipes, or simply pausing to notice the smell of rain, earth, or flowers. Such mindfulness reconnects us to the physical world and to history's quiet whispers. The history of lost smells also invites reflection on modern values. What do we prioritize when we choose convenience over complexity, sterilization over sensory richness? How does the loss of olfactory diversity affect our relationship with nature and with each other? This narrative is a call to awareness. To honor scent is to honor life itself, its fragility, its beauty, its impermanence. It reminds us that progress need not mean erasure, that the past lives on in the senses, waiting to be rediscovered. As this journey through the history of lost smells draws to a close, consider the smells that define your own world, the familiar, the fleeting, the unforgettable. Each is a thread in the tapestry of human experience, a link between past and present. In remembering and reclaiming these scents, we participate in a quiet revolution. We preserve culture not only through words and images, but through the very air we breathe. We rekindle connections severed by time and technology. And perhaps most importantly, we remind ourselves that the story of humanity is not only told through sight or sound, but through the rich, mysterious language of smell. The future of scent is unwritten, but its past is a treasure, one worth guarding, exploring, and celebrating. Because lost smells are not just vanished aromas, they are lost histories, waiting to be found once again.